Welcome back to another video, everyone, and today we are going to be talking about something that I see a lot of people discuss still to this day. You know, we are, what, 2 years and a bit into the D series of Vanguard, and this topic is still a very hot one, and I've done a video about it before, and we're going to do another one about it now, which is, of course, the Overtrigger. So, I've done a whole, Overtrigger discussion video about what I think about it, but in today's video what I want to really talk about is how I deal with it, because a lot of people have various different reactions to when the Overtrigger happens, whether they draw it or they pop it or they soul charge it or whatever, but most importantly usually when it determines a game. And I'll give you an example of how I deal with it by telling you what happened at a tournament recently, and hopefully this will be either applicable to you, or you will be able to, kind of maybe think about it in your own way. So it was a Wednesday night locals here in Tokyo, and one of my rounds, I think I was playing Willista, I want to say, and I was playing against a pretty well-known player here in Japan. He actually, I think, plays under a team called Esse, and so Esse has topped many times. He's also qualified for nationals this year, and I think maybe last year too, but that's besides the point. So he's playing Minerva, and he is playing immaculately. I'm actually making misplays here and there, just because I was still getting used to playing Ballista at the time. And basically he played out the game so well that once he got to his 5th turn, I want to say, it was gonna be like certain victory. Like there was no way that I was gonna be able to hold off. I think he had like at least 6 attacks ready with Minerva, and I was just like, damn, like this is really rough. I don't know how things are gonna work out. And when you know that you cannot survive against a turn where your opponent's going for the kill turn without checking a heal or checking a defensive OT, you have to bank on it, right? So you calculate in your hand, you look at the shield and go, okay, if I hit a 6 damage heal and then I get the plus 10k, can I guard the rest of the attacks with what I have in hand? If no, that means you have to go for another 6 damage heal and then become a 33k Vanguard, or thanks to the OT, you can check a defensive OT. So what happens is that my opponent, he thinks out his steps, he does his main phase, goes into battle, and swings with his first rearguard column. And because that's the way Minerva works, is that it goes rear, rear, sometimes rear, rear again, and then Vanguard, and then rear, rear, Van, or like stuff like that. You can do up to maximum 8 attacks, I believe, in Minerva. And so he goes for his first attack, and I already know that I won't be able to survive any of these with the current hand that I have, right? I'll be able to block maybe 4, but not how much he's capable of doing in that turn. So I go, okay, I have no other way to survive, so we're gonna have to just bank on the damage check. And of course, I damage check, and lo and behold, it's the OT. So we both just go like, oh, like, it's just like, well, there's the OT. It has appeared. And that kind of, and he's already seen his OT in the game too. So he literally just goes like, he thinks to himself, he looks at his hand, because he also committed quite a lot in that turn to be able to kill and win. So he just looks at his hand, he looks at it, he's like, okay, you got it. Like, we don't even play out the rest of it, like, don't even go to 6 damage, he's like, you got it, right? And I think a lot of people have different reactions in that moment. Some would just go like, maybe pray and like play it out and see what happens. And some people, obviously would like try to see if they still have heals, but I think he was also out of heals. Like there was just like no other way for him to survive basically, and still win next turn. But the problem is that, of course, if I'm in a certain mood, I might be sad or upset that I was the one that kind of, ruined that game by checking the defensive OT, and then obviously some opponents would feel really frustrated that they lost because their opponent checked the defensive OT. But what we did instead is we broke down every single turn that led up to that. So while the Overtrigger did conclude the game, and obviously it doesn't feel great because, he had game on board, he played perfectly too. So his perfect plays were still punished by a luck-based mechanic, but we still sat down after that for the next 10 minutes or so, and we talked about our turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, like every move we did. I was like, oh, so like you went for this and that play, And then I was like, oh yeah, I discarded this here because I was kind of trying to pressure you in the early game and I didn't need it at the time. And then I was going to try to find it off of like the search effect later down the line. And so we basically just forgot that the OT happened. And the focus for us, even though like I wouldn't say that we're particularly like close or anything, we don't know each other that well, but we're both players that are competitive and we know each other well enough to essentially just like, you know, care about getting better, right? The objective for most players that play in locals is to improve, / just like relax after work or class. And for both of us, the objective there was just to learn and play as best as possible. And I'm also someone that plays Minerva, so I was like, oh, you did this there, why didn't you do that? Or like, oh, I see you play this card, how come you play that over this? And things like that. So that's kind of how I deal with the Overtrigger. So for me, the OT will happen, and especially like obviously I played Evo for basically a year, and you know, sometimes I just Brain Gate OT, Eldo Breath, lol, 6 damage. You know, that obviously just happens. But there are definitely instances like this where there were so many other plays leading up to the moment when the OT was checked that we can discuss and try to learn from our plays, that obviously it doesn't help with the fact that the OT does ruin games, like let's face it, but we could still kind of make the most of it and try to get some information out of that game, try to learn something out of that game. So that's basically how I deal with the Overtrigger, and I think there's definitely quite a few ways to deal with it. Again, for those of you that haven't watched my old video where I talk about the OT, do I think it's a good mechanic and healthy for the game? Hell no, I think it's horrible. But I think that even with it existing, like sometimes I see people go, oh my god, the OT ruins the game for me, nothing else matters because the OT decides everything. And I don't agree with that. I think, while yes, the OT can decide the game, like the actual win or lose conclusion can be drawn from the OT. Yes, it very often is, especially in decks that compress like crazy. But in terms of whether you lose all value from a game just because the OT was flipped, I don't agree with that. I think that there's a lot you can learn from a game and improve as a player. Of course, you can give the counter argument of like, oh, what's the point of improving as a player if I just lose the OT? But that just means that maybe you're playing the wrong game, right? You still want to improve at a game that you play competitively, regardless of what its mechanics are. And you know, I've had people come in the comments before and say like, oh, how dare you take Vanguard competitively when it has these mechanics? And I'm just like, anything can be competitive. I can literally, like, anything can be a competition, and people have turned the most ridiculous things into competitions, and it doesn't really matter whether something has luck in it or not. There's literally rock, paper, scissors esports. Like it doesn't matter, right? Anything can be competitive, so that argument just does not apply. But so I think that generally speaking, yeah, it's like playing optimally, those 5 turns still gets to win 90% of the time, as Spira says in the chat there. And I think that you should learn from the right plays, because learning from the right plays, sure, in that one moment you lost to a luck-based mechanic, and let's say maybe in a different, yeah, like competitive Pokemon, I guess like crits and stuff like that could have happened. But when you do that correct play again next time, there is a high chance that it will work out in your favor and you'll be rewarded for doing the right play. So that's just my like kind of emphasis here, is learn from your plays, treat the game as a lesson as a whole, and don't just take the conclusion as everything, right? I feel like a lot of people like to just look at win or lose, that's it. There's no other discussion. And I think you should always think about the entire thing. Your game doesn't start on turn 1, by the way. Your game starts in the mulligan. You have, like, from the moment you pick which cards you keep in your hand, the game has already begun. And you can break down your choices from that very moment. You can literally, like right now, let's say I draw 5 cards here, and I look at this, and I choose which of these 5 I will keep and which ones I will throw back. And you can just analyze, are you good at mulliganing or not, right? Based on like what, like you can just like emulate different opponents you would play against based on the, like, before drawing those 5. And it's just like, you know, that's kind of how I see it. So I hope this video has explained my stance a little bit, and just kind of like, it's a bit of a recommendation, I suppose. I think it helps to have a healthy mindset. I think if you're always just molding over the OT, I think you're just gonna get sick of the game. And I think that it's better to kind of try to make the most of what you can from a game, even if a luck-based mechanic sometimes cuts it short. So I hope this video was useful. If it was, or if it wasn't, let me know in the comments. And if you liked the video, please give it a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you want to support the channel in any other ways, try to become a YouTube channel member, because by being a YouTube channel member, you get access to exclusive content. I do first-person POV fights where I explain how to play decks in super high detail, so make sure to check that out. And also we have an exclusive section on my Discord for YouTube channel members and stuff too, so that's really cool. But anyway, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.